We're going to begin with number 1, which has 2 surfaces facing different directions. Now, because there's 2 surfaces facing different directions, they cannot be the same value. If one surface is facing the light source, which is going to be this side, it's going to be the lightest one. The surface that does not directly face the light source will be in a shade or will get partial light. In any case, it will always be darker than the side facing the light. You're going to shade the darker area with your HB pencil, and you're going to shade the lighter area with your 2H pencil. When you shade, you're going to want to use hatching marks, and you want them to be close together and following the angle or contour of this little, almost looks like a little piece of paper that was cut and folded. For this right-hand side, I want you to shade it to a very light gray, almost to where it looks like a white. When I'm making my marks, I'm having them start at one end and I'm having them end at the other. You never want to draw short marks on the inside like this. The reason for that is you'll get all of these darker little bit marks in there and it will just look really sloppy and messy. And you can see that by doing one smooth, solid fill where your marks go from one end to the other, it makes it look very nice and clean. Now, notice I'm not having any gaps in my mark. So if I did have some gaps, like I have a couple areas with gaps, you're going to want to go back in and press as lightly as possible with your pencil. Now, if you have a hard time getting this to be a really light value, hold the pencil further back and just hold the pencil in place with your forefinger and thumb and just let the weight of the pencil create the lighter values that you're seeing here. So that was done with my 2H pencil. Move on with your HB pencil to shade the left-hand side. Remember, this is the side that's away from our light source. So this is going to be darker in value. Now, because it's an HB pencil, it's already going to make a darker mark than the 2H pencil. But whenever you're shading, you always want to build up your values in layers. So I'm starting with a light layer first with this HB. I'm trying to almost match the layer that I shaded on the right-hand side. I'm having my marks follow this contour, so I'm showing the 3-dimensionality of this form. To make it darker, I'm going in with a second layer, and this time I'm just pressing just a shade darker than what I previously did. So this is very similar to what we did with our value scales yesterday, where you're trying to make these little tiny adjustments here gradually. And I'm just going to do it one more time, just going a little bit darker. And this time I'm pressing a little bit harder with my pencil. But notice I'm not going that much darker, and I'm being very careful to start my marks at that middle line and have them end at the other middle line. What I am not doing is I am not scribbling, where I'm not going back and forth like this with my pencil. I'm lifting up my pencil after every line and making a mark like that. I'm just making my marks close to one another so I create a nice solid fill. Now, the last thing that I need to do is to create a shaded drop area, which is called a cast shadow. Your cast shadow is always going to be darkest near the object and get lighter as it gets further away. To show that this is sitting on a flat table, we're going to do horizontal marks. Same thing that we did when building up our other values. We're going to start with a lighter value, and then I'm going to be lifting up the pressure as I shade away from the bottom. I need to make it darker up here, so I'm going to go in and press harder with my HB pencil and then lift up the pressure as I move away from the inside. Notice how I'm starting to get a nice gradation of values. And I'm not shading all the way into my lighter values with every darker bit that I'm adding in. I'm letting the cast shadow define this bottom edge of this form. And there we have it. We have our first drop cast shadow with our light and darker side. For the second form that you're going to shade, do the same thing we did with the first, but this time you're going to create a cast shadow on the second object and then also an additional cast shadow on the bottom of the second object. Make sure your cast shadows are darkest near the object and get lighter as they get further away. Some surfaces or parts of surfaces get partial light. The transition between directly lit and partially lit areas can be sharp and contrasted, like the top image in number 3, or soft and gradual like we're going to be seeing in number 4. Now for the middle section of number 3, that's the area that's closest to the light source, so it should be the lightest value. Notice how my hatching marks are curving around the edge of the sides of that. They're straight in the middle and then they curve to the other side again. The left and right hand side of number 3 is darker nearest the middle portion and lighter as it gets further out. For your number 4, you're going to have the edges of your ribbon there darker, lighter in the middle, and then darker again on the right hand side. So as I'm shading, I'm pressing a little bit harder near the edge and lifting up the pressure of my pencil as I shade to the middle. For this one, you guys can begin going in with some cross-hatching marks to help develop your shading in your values. Just make sure that every little value layer that you're adding in, you're only pressing a little bit harder than the previous layer. So I started with my 2H pencil. Now I'm going to go in with my HB pencil to start putting in the darker values. I'm just going to show you what happens on the left-hand side if we just concentrate the darker values to that. You're going to start seeing how that side looks a lot more three-dimensional than the side on the right. The right side with those lighter values just doesn't look like it's going back into space like the left-hand side was. So make sure that you're putting the dark values in on both the left and right side. When you start shading your 5th, 6th, and 7th ribbon, always be aware of the position of your light source when shading. Additionally, you're also going to want to make sure that your marks follow the contour of the form. Notice that my hatching marks follow the contour edge of every little section that I'm drawing. When I cross hatch, I'm also making sure that I'm creating a gradation and smooth range of values so everything blends into one another really nicely. Whenever you shade, I would like your shading marks to match the shadows that I'm putting in my own ribbons. Now let's say for an instance that you've gone in too dark. You can take your kneaded eraser, mold it to a tip, and erase away with hatching marks to reveal the lighter value again. When you shade number 7, shade everything lightly with a 2H pencil, then go back in with your HB just to darken up the values and the cast shadows that you're seeing underneath the ribbon. So this is me going back in with my HB pencil just to give it a little bit of a greater range of values here. We'll get some more depth that'll look more realistic. But yeah, that HB pencil will really help make your object pop and look more 3D. So make sure you go back in with that HB pencil to darken up your values. So here's a final example of what 1 through 7 should look like. Your values should match mine. We should see that full range of values, good smooth gradation of values, and your hatching and cross-hatching mark should follow the contour of the ribbons.